Hundreds of thousands of people flocked to Washington, D.C. this weekend for the Women's March on Washington. Although not the official word, many said it was a response to the inauguration of President Donald Trump. We wanted to continue the conversations that were started this weekend through local voices and a roundtable discussion. Joining me today is Charm Bullard. She's the Director of Education at the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. She did not go up to Washington this weekend. Annie Salado was also at the march this weekend. She's the founder of a new media firm that's worked with various pro-life Christian and conservative groups. Diana Shore is the Director of Communications for the Virginia First Foundation. The group advocates for conservative and Christian values at the General Assembly and elsewhere. She was not at the March on Washington. And last but not least, Alsawin Priest. She made the trip this weekend, and the former nurse now describes herself as the Chief Administrative Officer of her family of 5. And you were at the march this weekend. Alsawin, I'd love to start with you. What did you think when you were there, and what were some of the sounds and the sights that really resonated with you?
Well, I brought my 13-year-old daughter with me. I traveled up with a group of 9 women, different ages, you know, an aunt that flew in from Kansas City. And I think we went up there because it was really important to feel that we weren't alone, that our sense of outrage, of indignation, that the America that we felt we were part of, that we love, we needed to see that there was other people that felt the same way, and boy did we see that. You know, 1.2 million people showed up, and it was an incredible feeling. It was like medicine for the soul to know that we're not alone and that we have a huge groundswell that's going to hopefully bear fruit over the next couple of years.
Andy, you were there yourself. Yes, obviously, you describe yourself as pro-life, I assume,
I am a
correct?
pro-life feminist, yes.
I wonder what your thought process was while you were up there seeing the same exact thing.
I had mixed reactions, to be completely honest. I had mixed emotions. Part of me was so encouraged by the outpouring of support amongst my fellow womankind, to see so many women there that were so passionate on behalf of the issue and united on so many. It was very encouraging in that way. However, I was as a feminist, as a pro-life feminist, as someone who's studied suffragist history, I was very disappointed in seeing that there was a lack of a coherent message. I understood that many of the women there were very upset with President Trump, and rightly so. Some of it is justifiable. But for the most part, I was saddened because a lot of the women there really couldn't articulate why it is that they were there. They held up signs that said things like, "I have my period," or some other just random messaging. So I think it confused things in a way. I don't tend to make an overgeneralization and say that all of the women there were confused, but I would say a majority of them were, and I thought that was a missed opportunity for us women, especially given when you think about the history of women's marches, where it came from. When pro-life suffragist Alice Paul started the Women's March, when you think about the history of that, how profound that moment was, I guess I was expecting that type of an event. So I was disappointed in a way, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I do hope that this would be able to unite and energize more women.
With that in mind, Charm, as someone that works with this kind of issue and getting people engaged actively in their communities every day, I wonder, watching from afar, what was going through your mind, taking into mind what Annie just said?
Sure. You know, I think what I saw is a group of people who wanted to have their voice heard. So perhaps some folks who felt like their voice wasn't heard, wanted to have their voice heard, wanted to be heard. I think ultimately what we've seen after this election cycle is an increase in hate speech and hate crimes, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum. At Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, we really try to get out into the community and encourage people to have these difficult conversations, to have these dialogues. I think that's the beauty of the American experience, is that we can all have different perspectives, different religions, different lived experiences, different races, different ethnicities, and we can hopefully hear from each other. I think what we are seeing, and our phones have been ringing off the hook, which is it's a good thing in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I just heard one of my colleagues describe it as an empathy gap. And there's this gap where we don't want to hear the other perspective, or we don't want to hear what the other side has to say. But I think If we can figure out ways to come together as community members to hear each other, to support each other, whether we disagree or agree, I think that's what encourages healthy dialogue and in turn, healthy communities.
Absolutely. Diana, while you were in Farmville watching everything develop this weekend from Friday on, I just wonder what was going through your mind as a woman who obviously is pushing for Christian values in the General Assembly and obviously thinks a little bit differently than some of the perspectives that were shared at the Women's March in D.C.
Yes. Well, first and foremost, let me just explain that I am also the director of social media for the Day of Tears. It is a national movement to create a day of mourning for moms, dads, and family members who feel that they want to mourn their abortion. So as someone who is a member of the pro-life movement, I was outraged. You know, she was talking about the outrage that she was feeling from some of the campaign rhetoric, which is totally understandable. But for me, I was outraged at some of the violent things that some of the participants were saying. You know, we've got national figures like Ashley Judd and Madonna, you know, openly inciting violence. You know, Madonna said, you know, I was thinking about blowing up the White House, and then you have Ashley Judd saying we came here to be vulgar and nasty. I don't think that's the type of rhetoric that most average everyday women can associate with. I mean, I know for one, as a member of the pro-life movement, you know, I was appalled at some of the signs that I saw women carrying that, you know, we're supposed to be open, and we're supposed to be inclusive, and we're supposed to be tolerant, and it seemed a little hypocritical that the signs weren't tolerant of my beliefs and my pro-life message that I want to share with other people.
Alswin and Annie, I'd like for you guys to jump in here at this point as folks that were there and saw this sort of protest going on. We should note that there were no reported arrests with the Women's March. I just wonder, as people that were there, did you get a sense that there was some sort of tension in the air?
Personally, I didn't feel any tension whatsoever. And, you know, I think that this discussion is primarily about the outpouring of concern that females feel about the incoming administration. This is not a discussion primarily about whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. And I personally didn't feel that, you know, there was like violent language were used by either of the two celebrities that this nice lady just talked about. I think that feels like, you know, in this new era of alternative facts, that it's very easy to spin it in that way, and it didn't feel like that at all. I felt that there is a fantastic energy and understanding and a very cohesive feeling within the march itself. And having a 13-year-old who at one point, you know, when she couldn't see over the heads of the huge, massive crowd, and I picked her up and I put her up on a platform, and she could finally see these hundreds of thousands of women, she got it. And I saw the smile on her face, and she realized that this is a very special thing that she was participating in, and that made me feel really good.
Annie, was there a moment in particular you remember that
I felt any that stood out, or that I felt any kind of hostility whatsoever? Yeah. I have to say, well, celebrities aside, because let's not give them any more relevancy than they actually deserve, ladies. Let's be real here, okay? They're pretty out of touch with how a lot of us live. So celebrities aside, I'd have to say I think the most tense moment for me was actually leading up to the march itself. When the march originally started and they began to market the march, if you looked at the core, the principles, the vision, and the mission statement, I agreed with most of it. It was very inclusive. What I was nervous about was that there were pro-life feminist, pro-life groups that were actually uninvited. They were removed from the website. So I went into the march thinking, I'm going to march with these women. I'm so excited. I unite with these women on so many issues like equal pay. I care a lot about what is happening to fellow womankind in third world countries. I oppose, of course, sex trafficking and work to end domestic violence. So I was so excited when the march first started to be able to unite with women on behalf of those issues. But after seeing how they were treated at the beginning, being removed from the website and uninvited in a way, I was hesitant. Going into it, though, I have to say, I held up a sign that said, "Real feminism rejects abortion." And going into it, I was blown away and surprised by the amount of women who who are actually quite receptive to that. So I would have to say the organizers of the march definitely are not reflective, from what I've encountered, of the women who attended the march. So many women walked up to me and said, I'm a pro-life feminist as well. I agree with your sign. I didn't think this was a pro-choice event. So I'm encouraged by that. I feel for the most part, I was never threatened. I never felt threatened. There were people that made sly remarks, but for the most part, I was encouraged by the overwhelming response that I actually got from women there.
And you know, the range of issues that were brought up at the march on Saturday were wide. I mean, abortion was not one of them, healthcare was one of them, the environment was as well. And as people that are active, Charm and Diana, in politics here in Virginia, I wonder, how do you think it's best for people who may disagree on issues, no matter what it is, to come together and do something like this, to sit down and have a conversation civilly? Do you have some advice maybe for people that want to start doing that now?
Sure.
Well, I mean, obviously, we have to get back to the basics. You know, politeness, polite conversation, which we ladies really enjoyed in the green room. It was really nice that we all knew why we were here, and we were able to talk about girl stuff. You know, and it was fun and it was relaxing, and we could do that. And part of it is just being, you know, tolerant of one another, tolerant of each other's beliefs in a real way. Really listening to one another. You know, the name calling has to stop. You know, it doesn't take much to search social media to see some of the signs from the march that I feel, you know, as a pro-life woman, attacked me and attacked my beliefs and did incite violence. I mean, some of them were brutal. There's no alternative facts there. Just a quick search will reveal that. And so that has to stop. The name calling has to stop. We can have real conversations about our differences without the name calling.
Charm, what do you think about that?
Well, I think you make excellent points. I think ultimately, I think folks should get involved in something greater than themselves. I think if you feel passionate about an issue, whether it be, because at the end of the day, this really, to me, the march was very much about the intersectionality that exists as a woman, right? So we're not just women, but we're Black, or we're Latino, or we're white, or we're heterosexual, or we're homosexual, or we're bisexual. So there's this intersectionality that exists. And so I think folks should get involved in their community and organizations that are really getting out and putting boots on the ground and doing the work that they want to be done. And then I think it's important for people to go to community you know, organizations and have these types of conversations, engage. I know often I talk to people about the difference between seeking to be heard and seeking to learn. I think if you're seeking to be heard, you're not really listening, right? Because listening isn't waiting for your turn to talk. Listening is hearing what the other person is saying and trying to engage with what they're saying and trying to gain understanding of what they're saying. And so I think if we can go into a conversation and actually listen and not seek to be heard, but seek to learn, I think that's where change starts to happen. And I hope, you know, particularly in the city of Richmond, because that's where we live in this area, I hope we're able to move from tolerance to acceptance. I might not agree with someone else's perspective. We may have different lived experiences, but I hope at some point I can accept them for who they are and what they bring to the table and vice versa.
That's awesome. Obviously, a conversation you would all agree that is not going to stop right here and should not, right?
Absolutely.
All right, sounds
Absolutely.
good. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all the time we have. We want to continue this conversation. Of course, there are only 4 voices here. There are millions more out there. And if you have any ideas for further conversations we could be having here at CVS 6 and in our community, let us know on WTVR.com. Thanks for being here.